Okay, so now I'm going to go over an example for using a string tokenizer. String tokenizer is a class in Java that you can use to basically parse string and extract the different values inside it. For example, you could put together a string that has values of different data types, and you could extract each of them. So you need to have kind of a separator. In this case, it's just a blank space. You could have some things like this, a semicolon, a comma, and stuff like that. We'll go over them after uh, going to the blank space example first. So let's say you have a string that is something like this, separated, each value separated by a blank space. I'm calling this string as by name example, and I'm going to create a string tokenizer. This is a class name, so this is the object name. You could name it anything you want, and I'm going to use this constructor that takes the string as the argument, and there's no other argument. So if you don't pass any other argument, like in this case, just example and no more arguments, then it means the separator is just this blank space. Okay. So if you have any other separator like a comma or semicolon or anything, then you have to explicitly include them. We'll go over that after this. Okay. Okay, so right now blank space is a separator, and so we'll just pass example, the string name, to the string tokenizer constructor. And then what we're going to do is we are going to, of course, we should know in what order we have the values here. So here we have the first thing is a string, the second is an integer, the third is a boolean. So there is a method called next token that you can invoke on this string tokenizer object, and that would return a string. So the next token method on the string tokenizer object will basically return the next string that is being extracted. So when it extracts, it treats each of them as basically a string. So the first string to be extracted is Jackson, so that itself is a string, so I can directly assign that to a string of value string 1. When I again call next token on this STK, the next token is this, which is extracted as a string. So 39217 is extracted as a string. So I have to do the integer dot parse int to basically convert that string to an integer, because I know that is an integer. Now, third time you invoke the next token method on the STK, that's also extracted as a string, but we know that's a boolean, so we can process it like this: boolean dot parse boolean, and we can make it as extracted as a boolean variable. So here it is true, so I can, validity basically gets assigned to true. So if true, if validity is true, then we can print these two strings, which is string 1 and zip code, and if not, I can just print invalid string. So let me just test them. I'm going to compile this first, then run this example string tokenizer. So it is extracted as true, so validity is true, so it prints these two strings. So I can make it as false. So let me compile now. So it is now false. So it prints invalid string. So let's turn it to true. Now let me introduce some other delimiters. So we call these as delimiters or separators, whatever you want. So I have included comma and a semicolon as a delimiter. Now when you have anything other than a blank space as a delimiter, we have to explicitly include them as a second argument to this constructor. So comma is a delimiter, semicolon is a delimiter. Now once you add this second argument, like the set of delimiters, we have to also explicitly include the blank space as a delimiter. So if you do not include the blank space as a delimiter and execute this. Let's see what happens. It gives out some error message. The reason for that is uh, Jackson is the first string, but the second string, since you did not include the blank space as a delimiter, it considers the blank space as the second string, this space. And this stk.next token returns this blank space as a string. And you're trying to get that as an integer. A blank space cannot be converted typecast to an integer, right? So that's why we want to discard the blank space, do not consider that as a valid string. So include blank space also explicitly as a delimiter. So again, if you do not include any arguments here for string tokenizer, blank space is a default delimiter. That's the only delimiter. But if we have some other delimiters like comma, semicolon, anything in your string, then you have to include those things in your constructor. And if you include those strings in your constructor, then you have to also explicitly specify blank space as also a delimiter. Okay, so now let's compile this. So now you can see it basically considers blank space as a delimiter, and then considers the second argument to be this the zip code as a string, and then typecast it to an integer, so you can print the zip code, and then the boolean, and this blank space is also discarded as a delimiter. Okay, so unless you're reading from some files, you won't basically need to include different delimiters. If you're just putting together strings of different values and sending from one side to the other side in a socket programming application, then you can just separate the arguments using a blank space, and in that case you don't need to include the second argument for the set of delimiters here. You can just send it as it is. Okay, so either way should be fine. Okay, so I'm going to stop here.